quality of conversation that you need in order to sustain your practice. And I'll give you some examples of what's going on now, things that you can get involved in as well. So, some context for me. I lead a faculty of 25 arts courses, and we've got 1,700 students across those courses. And the cuts to education funding has meant that the numbers in classes has gone up radically. So we had to think really carefully about what we could put in place to ensure that students take part in quality conversations and that staff are able to sustain those conversations in those positive environments. And it actually began with lesson observations. So all of you have been to school. Some of you might have taught in schools. You probably know that one way of judging the effectiveness of teaching and learning is going into a room and seeing how well Edwina or Anne-Marie are doing what they're doing. And what we realised is that actually the person observing got a hell of a lot more out of that than the person who was being observed and therefore judged. And I realised that there's a kind of parallel with some of the sorts of crits that we take part in sometimes. That idea, this theatre that we're sometimes a part of, when we have sort of stock phrases or stock answers to questions about our work because that makes us feel more confident and safe. And you might go into 3 crits and say exactly the same thing, 3 completely separate months, because the environment isn't quite right. You're not getting to the nub of what it is you need to get to in order to progress your work. So the art of the conversation was what we focused on, and we had to think about what is the right environment. So the first thing we did was knock down all the walls. We took, it's a normal classroom, normal college, lots of doors, walls, we just took them all down. And it meant that you could see what everyone else was doing. And it's quite similar to a studio like this. There aren't that many of these that exist outside of education institutions. And what you're doing is really public. It's not like sitting there writing an essay. You can put your hand over it and do your writing and no one can see. If you don't want, no one sees it. But in an environment like this, people are watching you progress all the time. So you've got that kind of vulnerability that Edwina was talking about. And it also meant, this is where the mentoring bit comes in, it meant that different classes, so different subjects and different age groups and different teachers were able to see what other people were doing and relationships started to form. So older students started speaking to younger students and helping them with their work. So we had lots of different workshops happening in this, vibrant space that was being led by the students. So there was this richness of resource, I suppose. So we started to think about worth and value and what we recognise as something that's useful for us. And a couple of years running, we took a load of the MA Wimbledon students to the college to do reciprocal interviews, I suppose we called them at the time. So you, as the MA student, you're presenting your work to an individual who may be 16 or 17, and they're giving you a tutorial on what it is that you're doing. And you might think, at the time I could see people thinking, oh bloody hell, what's this person, this child's going to say to me that I don't already know. But actually the questions that they ask, because they don't have the same hang-ups, they don't use the same language, usually we're quite searching. It's like, well, that, things like, well, but it just looks like this, or but why do you think it does that, or these are the things that it's making me think about. And similarly, the students the other way around were quite searching in their, they were demanding from the MA students. So they were like, I want you to tell me this, this and this about it. Does it do this? Does it do that? So it just changed changing the environment. We're going with this idea. So you change the environment, you change the rules, and so the conversation changes as a result. So it's those 3 things: environment, then rules, then conversation. So we're doing lots and lots of different sorts of mentoring relationships. We've got student to student, so peer to peer. We've got tutor to tutor, but we've also got, as Anne-Marie touched on, we've got external persons who we're just interested in, who we're having regular meetings with to talk about art practice or teaching practice. And those are things that we've sought out. So we're asking people if they're willing to spend a bit of time with us every now and again. what we did find was that long-term relationships seemed to be less effective, so people couldn't sustain it. If you didn't know how long this thing was going to go on for, it was really hard to keep it going. It became it became a drag. And but if you knew it was just for 4 months, you were going to have this many meetings in 4 months, people tended to stick to it. There was a bit more of a sense of urgency. And there's also this sort of proactive, reactive thing. I don't know what your tutorials are like, but I remember thinking, Christ, I've got to bring stuff to this person again. I've got to go to this conversation with a load of really interesting stuff that I've learned, and I've got to talk about it, and I've got to sound like I know what I'm doing, and I've got to be really searching. But the younger students have helped us understand that actually you need a balance of proactive and reactive. You need sometimes to be reacting to what people are putting in front of you, and sometimes to be providing the things for other people to react to. And that links back to the oscillating independence idea. So you're not always in the same state. You're sometimes wanting stuff invested in you, and you're sometimes offering things out to be reacted to. So we created, as I just mentioned, some mentoring opportunities, but since during my MA and then since graduating, me and various groups of people have organised reciprocal critical events and projects. Lots of them we called residencies. I remember being on my MA and thinking, how'd you get these residencies? They sound amazing. You know, like you just go off and do loads of artwork. And I just thought, well, you can apply for them and get on them, and that's fine, but you go there and it's somebody else's agenda, and that's fine as well if you need it. But actually I knew what I wanted, and I knew the sorts of questions I wanted to be dealing with, so we just designed our own. So we had the Goldsmiths PGC students have a sculptural draw-off with the sixth form students, so it was a day's event in a gallery space, materials provided, lots and lots of making, not the sort of paralysis through analysis thing. We weren't spending loads of time talking at that point. We thought through making, and then we had a sort of critique of each other's work, which seemed to work quite nicely because the two groups are from different places. It wasn't like, you guys are from Chelsea and you guys are from Wimbledon now, go for it. It was safer because it was people from different spheres, different ages, I suppose, at that point. We also organised a 3-day residency in a chapel in Harlowbury. It was camping, and that was pretty rigorous. It was a closer group of people. There was about 7 of us, and we were all on the MA together. And I may have mentioned it to you last time I spoke to you, because it's one of the things that's really stuck with me. But before we went, we wrote down the questions we wanted to ask about each other's work that had been difficult to ask in critiques or felt like they might be incredibly challenging, and we all did it in the same typeface and the same size, so nobody knew who'd written what. And then over dinner every evening we pulled them out of the hat and opened them up, and it was just potluck. Sometimes one night was just one person who got the grilling, and it was really tough. But those questions are the same set of questions that I've been using for about 4 years. And the ones that we didn't get around to talking about, we just opened them all out and just took them home. So I had this list of questions that had been brought to me by people that I really respected. So it was a nice tool for continuing to reflect on my practice. I also organised the breakfast sessions, which, again, I may have mentioned to you before, but we invited lots of people, writers, curators, artists, to come in and critique our work at the end of the year. And I did a lot of the blagging that you were talking about. So, hi, we met at this opening. Would you mind coming and having breakfast with us and talking about 3 students' work? And most people said yes. So, so I suppose that's to do with working out who you want to speak to, contacting them and asking them if they'll speak to you, which takes me into some of the stuff that Rosalie Schweiker, those of you who were there, had that conversation with, did that workshop with her, and she did that grid that was, what was it, at the top was who I know, and at the bottom was who I don't know. And then one side was who I want to be, and the other side was who I don't want to be, and you plotted these names on this graph. And I suppose that the negative ones, so who I don't know and who I don't want to be, perhaps that's useful in terms of working out why. So why don't you know, or why don't you want to be those people? But more importantly, for perhaps this, it's those who do you want to be, and who do you know, and who don't you know, and how do you make those links? So I think that axis can be incredibly useful for trying to continue the conversation. We also did speed dating at Central St Martin's, which was pretty full on. So there were lots of students and artists, and a panel of people who discussed, it was actually talking about the point of art school, but you could do it about anything. And then you had a set amount of time with the person that was sitting opposite you, and they rang a bell after us, and you had to move. So you had these really intense snippets of conversation that just made you think about things that you hadn't necessarily thought about previously. So the quality of conversation, working out what you need, when, how to find it, and what's already out there. So, environment. I was thinking about all of those questions, and I thought, you can ask all of those questions. You can ask as many as you like in as many different ways, but if the environment isn't positive, you'll get nowhere. So I suppose, as you were saying, the reading between the lines, what isn't happening here, what is happening here. So that isn't easy. Emotional intelligence and working out how to...
it's easy to say.
Yeah, it is.
Everyone is equipped dealing with that, at all ages of experience.
Exactly. And I think it's all right to get it wrong, and that needs to be expected, I think. So, what are your questions? These are the things I have to ask myself all the time. What are my questions? What do I care about? And are they general or specific? So is it like, what's the point? Or is it, why am I painting? Oh no, let's not go there. Right, okay. So, do you want to talk or do you want to listen, or both? And that changes at different times. So sometimes you just need, as I say, to be reactive. Sometimes you want to be proactive. And how do you talk about your practice? That's a big question. Can you confidently discuss what you do? Can you get enough distance to critique it? Do you need others to help you? And I think the answer is you will always need others to help you, but more at certain times. So yeah, who are your people? I think that's something that would be really, really useful to actually just start listing. Who are your people? Who are the people that you want to be surrounded with? Who are the artists that you want to be like? Whose work do you really respect? What are your links with other people? And I was just going to, before we go on to the...
Before you go on from that, I mean, those of you who have either just done or are about to do your postgraduate forum, that question of where you're made to talk about not your work, but the context around your work, another good way of thinking about it is exactly that, about who would be the people that you would most like to be like, or would be your, kind of in creative terms, in terms of artistic practice, who would you like to have to dinner, that kind of question. So, and presumably it wouldn't just be you alone in a room. In some cases it could be.
Yeah.
But think of it in those terms, actually, and so you can use those postgraduate forums, actually, to tease that question out, who these people, these individuals or references might be.
It's the mapping of your practice.
Yeah, the mapping of your work.
Yeah. So, some food for thought, really. So what already exists to help you reflect, and I've just got about 8 or 9 different sorts of events that happen in or around London that you can get involved with. And I'll just go through those and make a note if you want to, if you may already know about them. But there are peer sessions that are run by Kate Pickering. They happen all over the place. She's on Facebook, you can contact her, and it's a kind of, you just say, can I show my work? And then there's an audience and you go and you have a critique. They're really well established and I think fairly well respected. She's got lots of experience. Rosalie Schweiker does the pizza. Did she talk about this with you? No. So we were talking once and we were like, wouldn't it just be nice to have dinner with the artists that we want to talk to? And then she said, yeah, let's do that then. So she invites an artist of her choice. That's how it started. And then she invites a load of other people. They make pizza, and the artist can dictate what sort of pizza they're having. And they spend the evening together talking about work, coming up with ideas. And they happen fairly regularly, and it's open to anyone who wants to be a part of it. And she also invites people to invite artists. So it's pretty open, it's pretty relaxed, it's nice and informal, but you get to spend a whole evening with someone. So that's Rosalie Schweiker, and she's got, you can just go onto her website or email her about that. QArt, that you all know about. Lux Critical Forum, that's an application thing, it's a postgraduate application thing. But you can have a look at that. Engine Chat Chat at Beaux Arts, has anyone been to that? I haven't been to it. It's fairly new. It's a peer critique group. Critgroup.org, which is at ELT MFA. I think that's moved around a little bit as well. I get the impression that you can just ask to go and show your work there as well. These things may become a lot more attractive once you have graduated, and by then they will have all changed. But at the moment, this is what's available. There's forOneDayOnly.org, which is a showing and critique event. So you put your work, a group of people put their work up in space, and then you've got the opportunity to talk about it. Undead Painters. Anyone heard about this? So Undead Painters...
Zombie.
Yeah, I think so. Undead Painters is run by an artist called James Petrucci
He's a graduate.
and Alistair Gordon. Yeah, so you can just contact them, I think.
They are both ex-Nigel's course.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
And Twitter, I think they're mainly active on, so I'm sure they'd be up for that. Paint Club, UAL. Yeah.
That's
So,
more
It's mixed Finch.
Yeah.
But it's also linked with Middlesex now because Rebecca having moved there.
yeah, right. So those are a few of the things that are happening right now, and I knew about half of those. The other half I got from Facebook. I just said, what's happening in London, critique groups, that sort of thing, and people were just chucking things at me.